morning, and thanks for being so early for this presentation or screening. Just a few words before I give the floor to a representative on freedom of the media, Ambassador Bratu. This initiative started almost 10 years ago, but was revived in 2020, and this strengthening of communication between journalists in Albania and Serbia, and since recently Northern Macedonia, is one of the projects that we are very proud of in Mission to Serbia, of course, with assistance of field offices in Skopje and Tirana. But without any further ado, I want to give floor to Ambassador Bratu.
Okay, thank you. This project was revived, as Sejan says, in 2020 by the then head of mission, who was me. And I think that's the inspiration that I had. There was an exchange of students between Serbia and Albania, and a group of students from Serbia came to Albania. They came to Elbasan. There was a youth camp there, and I was at that time Norwegian ambassador to Albania. And then Prime Minister Tirana visited the youth camp, and he said to the young Serbs, "So how do you find the aliens?" Namely the Albanians. But his point was simply then, you don't know each other, and you should. You should get to know each other. And that has kind of been one of the things that's been stuck in my mind, the importance of young people getting to know each other, to see each other not as stereotypes, but to see each other as human beings. And I think that's incredibly important and increasingly important, because at the end of the day, and this is also something that Prime Minister Rama said some years ago, he had a long monologue, as he often does, where he said, you know what, we have neighbors, and we maybe not think that the neighbors are good neighbors, but they probably don't see us as good neighbors either. But one thing is sure, he said, none of us are leaving. None of us are going anywhere. We are stuck with our neighbors, and we better get to learn more about each other. And I think that is absolutely true. We need to know our neighbors. We need to understand them. That doesn't mean we agree with them, not always anyway, but it means that we do try to understand their perspective. And that's why I think this project, which now has expanded to North Macedonia, is so very important. I wish that more people, more young people could be involved, because I think we need more numbers. But I think it's very important that journalism students get to know about each other, about the neighbors, and to understand the similarities and the differences. Student film productions, joint film productions between Albanian students and Serbian students have been awarded. They've been awarded at this youth film festival in Novi Sad, but also in Niš. And the students that I met when I was head of mission in Serbia impressed me by talking about the similarities they saw. There was a joint production film on the castle in Shkodra, the Rozafa legend, which is in Serbia, but also, of course, in Albania. So the students discovered that there were some connection points, and to understand each other. So I think this is important. It's important for, I don't like the word reconciliation process. It's important for understanding and living with the neighbors. But it's also important for young students to learn and to be challenged, because the older you get, the less you will probably be willing to be challenged. So now is a good time to be challenged and to think through what you think about life, what you think about other people, other nations. At the end of the day, all of us in this room, I think we can say, are Europeans. from different parts of Europe, but we're all Europeans. EU membership does not designate someone as a European, although the EU seem to think that. But I'm a Norwegian. Norway's not a member of the EU, but I'm a European. And Albanians and Serbs are also Europeans. European culture, broadly speaking, it's important that we understand each other and to learn. So I think the project is good in the sense of learning about the neighbors, but it's also very important about learning about mobile journalism, about production techniques, and challenging yourselves as up-and-coming journalists. Now, journalism is a difficult profession. It's a thankless profession these days. It used to be different. It used to be that journalism was highly respected, well paid. No longer really the case. But our societies need journalism more than ever. But we need ethical journalism. We need journalism that does its best to follow journalistic codes of ethical conduct. We are all human beings, so we will all make mistakes. That's clear. No one is perfect, but we have to have the aspiration of following the ethical codes. So I think on so many levels, this project, this work is extremely important, and I'm very happy that you will now have this session here today. And I just wanted to say a few words at the opening just to encourage you, and also to encourage my, or should I say, former mission colleagues to continue on this. Please find the money. And if you need political support, well, you have a friend in the representative on freedom of the media who would be happy to lend his voice to support this and to do fundraising together with you. Anyway, I wish you a very interesting session. I'm looking forward to listening and discovering, because I'm continuing to be curious myself, and curiosity, I think, is a vital prerequisite if you want to be a good journalist. You have to be curious, and you have to be curious about learning about other people. And actually, I would say a good diplomat should always be curious and listening to. So with that, I will end by just an anecdote from a former Greek colleague who said, the best advice to public speakers is three things: stand up, speak up, and shut up. So with that, I end my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bratu. The idea of this session is to present the work of the students done during the training in Niš, and just a little bit of how does it work, actually. We have students from, we already had students from Škodra, Novi Sad, Niš, Tirana, and Elbasan. I think I didn't forget anyone. The idea is to have a group of 8 students gathered together in a training on mobile journalism and visual storytelling. Why did we choose mobile journalism and visual storytelling in the era of social networks? Because we strongly believe that you have to have certain professional standards learned before you start, like experimenting with different formats and different visual things. Up until now, we had more than 30 students. Some of them are still in very strong connections, and as some kind of result of these activities, we already had universities in Škodra and Novi Sad applying for some cross-border projects together and actually getting those projects. So this story is the developing one. I don't want to go any further. Of course, there will be a possibility to ask anything that interests you, but I would now ask for the first movie. Yeah, it sounds a bit pretentious. For the first video, just to know, these are the videos produced during the training program, and you must know that none of these students, when they started the training on Monday, didn't know much about mobile journalism or about visual storytelling. And this is the result of 4.5 days work.
Ne govorimo o niškoj tvrđavi, ne govorimo samo o njenim kapijama, mostovima i bastionima. Govorimo o mestu koji je vekovima bio strateška tačka. Kroz te vekove i promene vlasti, ovaj prostor je bio prilagođavan, dograđivan, rušen i ponovo građen. Upravo iz te promene vlasti mi vidimo grad Niš i Nišku tvrđavu kao mesto na kome su se okupljali obični ljudi, razne civilizacije i vidimo promenu tekom velikih sila.
Nema sumnje da Niška tvrđava predstavlja jednu značajnu tačku u istorijskom razvoju grada Niša, jer pre svega ona se nalazi na mestu koje je bilo naseljeno još u antičkom dobu. U suštini ona je izgrađena kao jedno značajno vojno uporište, što nam i dokazuje da je Niš u to vreme bio jedan važan vojni i saobraćajni centar.
Imamo
We have archaeological digs coming from the Middle Ages, the Byzantine period, which are partially preserved, unfortunately. At the entrance to the fort, we have the remains of Roman baths, and we have a lapidarium, the old gates, the Ali Beg Mosque. So until the renewal in the 18th century, the fort has changed its function, but it has never lost its importance. The geographic position of the fort and the city of Niš is such that it connects main crossroads from the east and the west. And as proof of that, through the history, we have seen numerous wars here, exactly due to the reason that some powers wanted to occupy this location. For example, have the Austrian and Turkish wars during the 18th century, where also the Serbs participated frequently in the hope of someday getting free of the Ottoman rule. This is no longer a war fortress, but it is a place of meeting of culture. The Niš fortress is a protected cultural heritage of great historical importance with numerous archaeological finds, but it also represents a center of the cultural and social life of the city park, a space where we regularly have concerts, different events, seasonal events. In spite of its indubitable historical importance, we still have the question whether this space now is seen as a priority in the plans of the city.
We are here at the old cemetery of city of Niš. It is one of the greatest historical gems and open museums in Niš and in the whole southern part of Serbia. People have been buried here from 1800s up until 1971. It is one of the biggest open museums in Niš. However, as you can see, it is ruined and abandoned.
To talk more about the history of the graveyard, we have Stefan Tomic, the historian.
Stefan, thank you for being here with us. How do you view the old cemetery?
When I look upon Old Cemetery, I see not only a significant part of the history of Niš and southern Serbia, but also for whole Serbia and Macedonia. Here are buried some of great people who changed the future of 20th and 19th century.
How do you see the future of this place in the next 5 years?
Unfortunately, our government doesn't recognize the significance of this place. So in 5 years, I expect that this place will be even more neglected.
What would you tell to future generations as a historian when it comes to this place?
I would encourage them to explore this cemetery because here lies the people who lived before us.
Locals often pass by and walk here. Some even say that this monument has turned into a dog park. Although this memorial park has remained in a state of ruin and neglect, it reminds us to preserve our historical heritage and not forget our origins, so that they do not forget us.
I think that people can pass here. It's safe. Perhaps you need more lighting, but there are no, let's say, stray dogs. We had a lot of stray dogs previously, but not anymore. I think that in general, this graveyard is a bit scary. I think it could be renovated because a lot of children live in this neighborhood. For example, I personally, my friends live here. I like it in general because it's next to the center and everything, but this is one of the very few times that I actually cross the graveyard because I find it scary.
Reform Center, Emilija Petrović.
On November 1st, 2024, the Novi Sad railway station canopy collapsed, killing 16 people, which had awakened the youth to start protesting. Vladimir Vuk is a high schooler with a big heart. He has heard the voices from generations above him and does everything he can to support their cause.
Injustice really hurts me, and I feel that there has been a huge amount of corruption and everything, and I believe that it's my duty of almost every citizen in Serbia to fight against that same corruption.
Ivana, his mother, was not surprised by Vuk's passion and determination, as he was part of many protests even before he could stand up.
When this starts, actually, I was not surprised that he wants to be present, but what I was surprised about was that he wants to be actually directly involved, you know. And for me, that really made me, I have to say, proud, because at that moment I realized that I raised one decent and clever young man.
From treacherous marshes to massive protests, Vladimir Vuk has met a lot of people along the way.
I went to a lot of students' marches, walks. I have seen a lot of people who are living like in the middle of nowhere. And when I went there, I see people who are happy that we're coming, that they're hopeful. They see, even though they're old and they may not see another day of their life, they're hoping for better tomorrow. They're hoping for better future for us and for them.
His mother remembers the 90s. She remembers how hard everyday life was. Sanctions, inflation, war and violence. It was just part of daily life.
We were ready to be violent if government is violent toward us. These kids are not like that. And basically that's the reason why they will win. We were trying a lot. But if we did enough, your generations will not be in this position today. You know, what we did good, we actually raised our kids in a good manner. So that also matters. Because all these students are somebody's sons and daughters.
The government was silent, deaf even, but they didn't know how to oppress, to silence the silence.
I'm scared that at the end everything stays the same, but I do not believe that that is an outcome that's possible.
Are you scared of what may happen?
I've been fighting here for a year and a half, and I believe that there are so many people who have been doing the same as me. That cannot be failure, you know. It's a positive thing with positive emotion, and it's just set to be right, so yeah.
Citizens and students did not forget what happened on November 1st, and they will certainly know where they are now. A step closer to the original demands, because without the youth, a country ceases to exist.
Niš Fortress is a place where history and art meet. Among the old stones, murals inspired the Niš Wild Jazz Festival turned parts of the fortress into an open-air gallery. Away from the fortress, one mural tells a quieter story. This wall is not in the old city stone. It's next to the home of a local journalist. Who's the person that painted this mural?
So this is a dude named Eshko. He's a very famous artist in Serbia. He has made numerous different paintings and, of course, art. He's a graphic designer by his craft. He has done a lot of murals in Niš and in other cities.
The artist Eshko painted it here for a reason, to keep a person present in the neighborhood not as a headline, but as a face, a symbol, a reminder.
So that's my dad. Sadly, he had passed away in 2020, but he was a very important journalist from this city, from Niš, and he was like a very big influence in my life and a very big influence in all that I currently do.
How did it make you feel when you first saw the mural?
I feel sad, a bit happy that someone actually noticed my dad and thinks he's important and that he's done a lot for this craft, but I also feel sad that we'd have to do something like this.
In a city where murals can decorate, distract, or even cover problems, this one, painted 2 years ago, does something different. It doesn't hide anything. It marks a life, and it asks the city to remember.
So, as you may see, students were interested in different things and different topics, but I would love to go a step back and ask first, Gladia, as we are in her city, how do you feel about this? What was your, like when you heard about the project and when you got involved, what were your thoughts?
When I first got introduced to the whole idea of it, I was really excited, but also scared, because I didn't know how to do all of the stuff. I remember the first day I got in Niš on the first meeting. I felt really unsure about myself, but when I tell you, I'm really honest about this. The moment I stepped inside, it felt really nice. I felt really welcomed, and there hasn't been one single day where I didn't learn something new, even the most unimportant ones. Every single thing that I've learned there has followed me to that day from now, in school, even in everyday life. With also the Mojo film that we did, we've learned a lot about each other. I didn't know that we had that much in common. We saw that with all that difference that we had, we really are the same. We share the same problems. We also share the same words, which was nice to learn about. And what I'm mostly grateful for on all this project that we had is that I met amazing people. I met really great people, and I'm forever glad that we created such an amazing bond, and I'm so grateful for that.
Thanks for this nice words, Gladia. As a host in Niš, Angela, how did you feel about, being with students from Albania and from North Macedonia, showing them Niš, showing them what you do? Did you feel,
It felt amazing because I haven't had a chance to be a host for someone new and to meet such great people and such hardworking people for, those 5 days we were together. We were sharing all of the problems we had during the filming and all of the little things we knew about editing and Mojo and storytelling we shared with each other. So I felt great, and I hope they liked Niš. I wanted to show them even more, and I hope they would return to Niš soon so we can explore a lot of historical things. And as Gladia said, we realized how much of history we share and how much of words we shared, so we text each other in those words, and just it's a funny connection. But I loved it, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to be in such a project, because I didn't know a lot about video editing when I entered the project, and I had a lot of help from Philip and Bobby and Vladimira. So I saw my products there, and I'm proud that we did such thing in such a short time, and I hope to be even greater in my work as a journalist in many years that come along.
Thanks. So this started as improving of communication between Serbia and Albania, but as the years passed, we understood that this region should be much more interconnected, not just on the level of Serbia and Albania. So this year, and I must thank presence in Albania and field presence in Skopje for extreme help that we had from them, because we couldn't connect with universities in Albania or in Northern Macedonia just like that, just picking the phone and trying to persuade someone to take part in this kind of project. So for the first time this year, we have introduced students from North Macedonia, and it showed some great results, because not because he's here, but Philip was one of our best students overall so far. So how do you see this thing, Philip? Or maybe to give it, do you see some possibilities to use these connections in the future, in your future work?
Yes, I think I will use a lot of connections that I make. I mean, I met a lot of great people over in Niš, for example, like Gladia, like Angela, Nicola, and many others. The workshop was very helpful. I was at first a little bit skeptical, you know, because those workshops are usually boring and like 100 slides of presentations, and I was thinking, okay, at least I will go to Niš. But then, it was something else. Like it was really good organized. There was a lot of practical work, which I like a lot. We were hanging out, we were editing, we were recording. Even the time was really short. When you look at the agenda and you think, oh, 5 o'clock, that will be a long day. But then after all, the time was short because it was so interesting to be making videos and just to communicate and to hang out with people. It was not just like any other workshop. It was something much more interesting. So that was a nice experience.
Thanks for that. I must say that it was well organized because it was not the first one. So now we already, you know, like we have practice on that. And I also must say that the first training that we had was done during COVID. And I think it was the first time ever, for me at least, that the mobile journalism and the visual storytelling was done online. And the kids from that group, students from that group, did fantastic job regardless of the fact that they never met in person. We of course changed that afterwards because apart from the joint training, students are doing joint production afterwards. We're not letting them, you know, like just to go away. So they do a joint production. As Ambassador Pratu said, some of these products were also awarded in the festivals, in student festivals in Serbia, but it also means that we take students to some little study visits. So we bring students from Serbia to Tirana, usually to the Media Development Forum organized by Presence here. This time, as this conference was here, we used the opportunity to bring students here. We also bring them always to Students' Festival in Novi Sad. So, as Ambassador said, this constant communication is the thing that we are working on. I really believe that now you have, you know, like you have a reliable source in Niš, in Tirana, in Skopje. Whatever happens in your future career, you know that there will be people you can rely on there. At this point, I would like to give floor to anyone if there is any question or suggestion or whatever you might say. Oh, thanks for that. I forgot to mention. We started with the very, very prominent UK consultants. Mr. Karol Chioma, who was like the pioneer of mobile journalism in Europe in general, and we were very lucky to have him because he's not very easy to get. And two other UK consultants, Rick Thompson and Roy Sachi. But over the period in a second project that we're doing, we trained mobile journalism trainers. So we are now doing with local trainers from Serbia who are, I would say, fantastic, but I would let students to assess that. In general, we usually have two trainers. One is more dedicated to technical aspects and the other is more dedicated to editorial aspects. But as we want them to be, you know, like one man or one woman show, we're really trying to combine everything so they can get editorial, technical, all the aspects in this period of time. Yes?
It's a technical question. What kind of equipment are you using when you produce the films? Do you have special cameras? Are you using your iPhone?
No, it's used, we are using mobile phones only. The idea is, you know, like with the modern journalism, the idea is to be, of course, very fast. So the idea is that they can shoot, edit, and distribute the whole thing from their mobile phone. And all the things you saw was produced using mobile phones only. Of course, you can combine with your laptops with different editing techniques, but the idea is to produce using mobile phone only, of course, with some additional equipment like microphones, things like that.
So it's not very expensive?
No, it's not expensive at all. And if there are colleagues from other missions, just to tell them, like this is not a very expensive thing. And this is the thing that we will try to push forward as long as there is money available. And thank you for your support in future fundraising for this.
What kind of phone was used for the first video? Because I think it was obvious that some of the shots in the first video were really professional.
Well, we're working with the professionals, so I don't know which phone was used.
It's an iPhone 16. We used that one. We lent it from a friend because our phones were kind of laggy, and we wanted to do a good video. And we also used the technical thing, like the gimbal from the Mojo technical stuff. And we had a lot of problems because I haven't recorded anything with the phone like that, and this experience was a first for me, and I also think for Philip, because he's used to professional cameras, but I think we did a good job, and we're kind of making each other better in it.
From our experience, the biggest problem is the sound. Sound recording is the biggest problem with mobile journalism. But again, with like development of technology, the microphones are getting better and cheaper. And when we started this like 4 or 5 years ago, it was not so inexpensive thing. Like to get all this additional equipment was not extremely expensive, but like for journalism students or journalists from small news desks in Serbia or wherever in the region, it is some kind of expense. But now with the developments in technology, it's really becoming quite cheap.
And one more question. Which tool do you use for editing? And is there a possibility to edit the audio? Because there were differences in the audio.
You understand that this is the training product after 4 days of training, so they are imperfect. We had a lot of things to,
Go one step further, so we know now about
they were using KineMaster, and which editing programs were you using? Just the microphone.
For our video, we used Premiere Pro for the editing. Because I have experience in that, but I think there are a lot of good softwares for the phones like CapCut and that stuff. So I think the others were using that.
And also for the audio, we also use our phone, just voice recording. And then there was this web page, Audio Enhancer, Nicola presented me to that, which would remove the background noise. It was great, it was free, and it did the work.
Okay, the whole project is great, and thank you for organizing it, and I hope that you will continue, and hope that you will include more people. I have only one comment. Since you are trying to work with these Mojo techniques and stuff and so on, I think that's great. That's not just the future, it's happening
here.
now.
Yeah.
It's here. And I think there is the comment is that I think that it's a problem with trainers, I guess, that basically although you're using Mojo techniques, the presentation and the content is created like for television or something like that. So I think that in I don't know, next year or wherever you continue, I think that you should work more on this, like how to present it and to be more, like more like for social networks, let's say. Yeah.
Yes, that's something that I said at the beginning. We are aware that most of the content is going to social networks, but the idea is to learn them, like professional TV standards, broadcast standards, from lights, from where do you stand, how do you stand, all these things, like learn basic journalism, basic TV journalism, and you can develop from there then. Well, if there's no more questions, thanks a lot for being... Oh, there's one more question. Nicola?
I'd like to add something.
Just get the microphone, please.
I'd just like to add something about the professional standards. We were talking about doing something in the style of social media, but we also thought that would be good to learn how to do classical TV, pretty much. So we could have done that in the style of let's say Instagram, Facebook type of journalism, but we wanted to just try and see how it would look if you could create a professional video, but so it could be published on TV. So this could go on a television station in a sense, but also it could be transformed to be more for social media. That's why we use center shots usually, and it can just be cropped for Instagram and all that.
Yes, Ambassador Bratu. Oh, yeah.
Not to dwell on things, but I just got the idea that, are you considering, I mean, now that the project is coming to an end, I mean, your part of the project is coming to an end, there will be a new generation, but are you considering continuing to work together? Are you considering the possibility of maybe going into documentary short films or the short film format? And if so, there are a lot of festivals around, also in the region. I can mention DocuFest in Prizren, for example. That could be nice venues for presenting such work. So I'd just like to encourage you to continue developing your skills and looking into new formats. Obviously, social media, that is the present and possibly also the future. But also short films, documentary films, that kind of thing is also, I think, very interesting, but just to encourage you.
It's a great idea. We have a whole small production team here apart from 3 students in the panel. We also have Martin and Nicola present, so maybe we can brew something already here in Tirana.
I mean, yeah, we actually talked about creating something other than the Mojo workshop, and we also proved that it is doable because we worked online and it was great. So we've definitely gone through that talk. We're gonna work on that.
Since I was a part of this project, I need to thank all of you. I don't know where to start to this thanks, and what is the thing that you think that it might change to a better thing, so it could be better, except the microphone, the quality of audio.
Well, everything can be better. I mean, that's, but I don't know. I think we now have this kind of format that works, and if it's not broken, don't fix it. So for the time being, yes, maybe with some, additions like producing more for social networks, thinking about documentaries, but I think so far so good.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, for your interest, and we can continue conversation during the conference. Thank you.
5-6 minutes per person. But I actually have like 2 sets of questions. And, you know, I've sent this. So, good day to everybody. I think that slowly we can open the session. We gave extra minutes for the people to enter the room, but I assume it was sufficient. So good morning to everybody and good day. My name is Dragan Sekulovski, and I am today within the role of moderator of this panel. I'm actually also the executive director of the Association of Journalists of Macedonia, and it is a really huge pleasure to be here and to host this, I would say, pre-final event of this nice conference. So the reason why we are actually gathered today is to speak about 2 important things. Number 1 is confronting the impunity of media workers, and number 2 is what can we do actually a bit more to protect them through amending of several laws, including the criminal code. And of course, I'm not going to speak myself here. And before starting the panel, actually I have to share one good news and one bad news. I'm going to start with the bad news, unfortunately. So our speaker, Mr. Veljko Milic, the Director of Legal Affairs of the Independent Journalist Association of Vojvodina, unfortunately didn't make it to come. But that gives you a bit more flexibility, meaning that we might finish the panel a bit earlier, because I learned that some of you should catch a plane. So yes, this is the new format that I'm presenting. So it is my pleasure to present the speakers. I have on my left side Ms. Alma Kudraliu, who is a judge, Special Court for Corruption and Organized Crime from Albania. And then on the left side, we have Mr. Radomir Kračković, who is President, Media Trade Union of Montenegro, and my friend. And on the left side of Radomir, we have Ms. Mirna Miljanović, Head of Department from Public Relations and Contact Points for Safety of Journalists, Ministry of Interior, Republic of Srpska from BiH. Welcome to everybody. Before I invite the speakers, I wanted to actually set some rules of this panel. So basically, the starting point of this discussion is very clear. So when threats to journalists, despite of the fact either they're physical, they're digital, they're targeting gender varieties or whatsoever, if these kind of threats are not being seriously processed by the institutions, and when I say institutions, I dominantly mean on the Ministry of Interior, on the Public Prosecutor's Office, on the courts, then it's not about only the individual journalists and media workers, it's about the safety of the media community. And basically, if we are not following this correctly, we are risking to, in a way, undervalue the principle of freedom of expression and the reputation of the country. So today, the point is not to speak about legalistic topics. So we're not going to, laws or read directives. It's mainly about how can we make these laws functionable? How can we make this in practice in order to prevent certain attacks to journalists? Because all laws are not only to punish people. They also serve as preventive mechanisms. And this is something that very often is not being talked about quite often. Before we give the floor to the other countries, I was also asked by the organizer to share some quotes for the case of Macedonia, having in mind that I'm coming from North Macedonia. So the case of North Macedonia, just in 2 minutes, is very interesting because we amended the criminal code in 2023. It was a revolutionary, let's say, task. Because for the first time, media workers, so journalists, cameramen, also other individuals within the media community, and also their family members, very much important, they received a status a bit to be treated as police officers, let's say. So that meant that basically if you attack a journalist on the street, the public prosecutor office would, chase you ex officio, and the punishment for the perpetrator would be a bit higher. So 2 years later, now we are trying to see if we did a good job, because we already had like several cases that were happening in the past. For the moment, the Association of Journalists of Macedonia, we measured 15 attacks to journalists. Most of them are being criminal. Some of them are being ongoing, but 5 of those cases already finished. And the cases that actually finished, I'm glad to say that in all cases, journalists were protected and justice was in place. And one of the reasons that maybe Reporters Without Borders quite recently placed the country in a relatively good position, I would say, is mostly about the amendments of the criminal code and of the effects that is giving it now. Of course, it's not so bright. We also have some dark spots in it. So if you ask journalists that were protected by the criminal code, are you satisfied? Are you happy with this? Most of them would say not really, because in all 5 cases, the final verdicts were actually were not effective jail. It was suspended jail. So they received 6 to 12 months, the perpetrators, suspended jail time, meaning they would not spend the time within the prison, but if they repeat the deed, then potentially they would face criminal charges again and imprisonment. So we should also be aware that it's not only to have a positive verdict when it comes to the harms of journalists towards the perpetrators. It's also the penological measure, the quantum of the time spent within the institution. Is it enough to be suspended, or it should be effective? So maybe this is going to be also a question of you or my colleagues to pose a debate. But before going that, I just want to say that it would be good for all the region, for all the countries, to actually think about whether to amend the criminal codes in order to secure better protection of journalists. Yes, we do have some let's say, not so favorable experience, but from the other hand, countries within the Western Balkans now can measure the effects of this kind of laws. So, firstly, it is very good that we have different profiles of this, because multi-sectorial collaboration is very much important. And it's not by accident that we have a judge, we have a person from the police, and we have a journalist, because this is actually the triangle that is very much important when you speak about safety of journalists and impunity. So in that sense, I would ask the colleague, Alma Kodraliu, judge, Special Court for Corruption and Organized Crime in Albania. This sounds a bit frightening in your title, you know, if I'm going to say it again. But speaking about juridical perspective, can you give us a bit more, let's say, context? Where do cases involve threats in Albania, generally? What is the most typical attacks or maybe intimidation of journalists and media workers? And what does the court do? What is the role of the court when you're facing with this kind of criminal deeds?
Hello, everybody, and thank you.
In fact, when it comes to crimes against journalists, we have considered them. What is important is the perspective of consideration, of judicial consideration of this case. Attacks against journalists in Albania have worryingly increased in numbers. In 2024, there were 24 incidents. In 2025, 45 incidents, while the cases of harassment in the internet have doubled from 2022, increasing in 19 in 2025. What I wanted to present, I don't know, you can interrupt me anytime if you consider it unnecessary. I have prepared something when it comes to the legal framework, Albanian legal framework, and what are some of the gaps, discrepancies from the point of view of journalists of legal amendments in Albania. So far, the case of violence against journalists have been considered as simple criminal offenses in the Albanian legislation. Meanwhile, normally, they should not have been considered as criminal offenses against an individual, because when they occur because of the duty, in addition to violation of the personal sphere, they violate the right of the journalists to provide information and the right of the public to receive such information. In this context, the state has the obligation to take proper measures not to violate the freedom of speech, but actively they have to take all measures to defend journalists from third-party attacks as provided in the European Convention of Article 10, and there were several, from the European Court, there were several violations found. The focus of the European Union has been the protection of journalists, and they have approved a number of recommendations. Most important is the one of the Ministerial Conference of Member States of 2016, which assigned specific duties for member states when it comes to the adaptation of legal framework, institutional protection measures to protect journalists. I'm not going to mention the pillars of this recommendation because they are very theoretical, but they focus on the prevention, protection, and criminal prosecution. But considering this recommendation and other declaration, Albania has made several legal amendments in this field. When it comes to the legal framework, Albanian legal framework, I mentioned before, the criminal offenses against journalists because of duty have been considered simple criminal offenses so far. What that caused? Mainly criminal offenses against journalists being considered as simple criminal offenses were left up to the analysis of the judges, not the qualification of the criminal offense, because they would qualify according to the legislation in effect, but the effect they had when it comes to the freedom of speech, in violating the freedom of speech, they were left up to the analysis of the judges, meaning when it comes to determining the type and the measure of decisions, judges, mainly when it comes to criminal offenses against journalists, although they were not different when it comes to the legal provisions from other criminal offenses against simple persons, usually carried a heavier sentence as their respective offenses. Considering the obligation of the state to protect journalists, in January of this year, the criminal code was amended. Specifically, the criminal offense of slander is partially decriminalized when it comes to journalists, but this decriminalization had to meet several conditions. Specifically, what were these conditions? Because these were the devil lies in the details. In order for the journalist not to be subject of the criminal offense of slander, the journalist had to be registered and recognized according to the legislation in force. This brings forth the first problem in the application of this provision. When it comes to the interpretation as what does it mean registered and recognized? Where do the journalists register? Meanwhile, the Association of Journalists are voluntary entities, and membership in these organizations cannot produce legal consequences in their disfavor. On the other hand, if there are methods to register this journalist, the question remains, is it proportional, their dismissal of the journalists that are not registered? Are they not subject of these legal protections? The other condition to be recognized creates insecurity in the application of the law because, first, there is a condition for the protection of journalists without defining the criteria that should be considered by the court or the prosecutors for this condition to be met. The question remains, do they have the legal protection, the journalists that are not recognized? The criteria registered and recognized should be cumulative or separate. This method, this provision, leaves gaps for unnecessary discretion of the judges when it comes to the qualification of the criminal offense. And considering this, I believe that the way this provision is written might cause problems when it comes to the quality of the law in the sense of the standards of the European Convention of Human Rights. In fact, the way this provision is written might not be in line with the provision with the directives of the European Union, because the recommendations of 2016 have expanded the term of journalism by using the term media actors, considering also the new methods of media in the digital era. According to these recommendations, media actors include not only classical journalism, but also all of those people that contribute in the public debate, carry out journalism activities, or meet public functions of supervision. Clearly, this means that protection of journalists should be guaranteed because of the activity they perform, not because of a formal definition that has to do with a registration or their recognition by different organizations. The other problem, which seems to be in the application of such provisions, has to do with the fact that the journalist is not liable for criminal liability when, in addition to being licensed and recognized, has to do with the publication. The publication has to do with the general interest issues. The journalist should have been aware, etc., etc. Many technical terms. The question here is, what changed in essence with this new legal amendment? Because the criteria in considering the public interest, verification of the accuracy of the information, are considered by the courts even before. And they have been their focus because judges recognize the standards of the European Court of Human Rights, which is part of the legal system when it comes to the issue of human rights. In this sense, although these legal provisions, legal amendments, are a positive step forward in their practical application when it comes to journalists and their protection, it remains to be seen what benefits they'll produce for the media actors, because as long as they don't automatically expel the idea of filing criminal charges against journalists for slander, they have to face the courts, to spend money for their defense and prevent evidence, same as before. And in this case, the situation is even more difficult to disprove defamation charges because of the formal criteria they have to present in order to benefit from that. They have to be registered and recognized. In this sense, the existence of this provision, same as in the past, I believe allows for a stopping effect, raising barriers for journalists, and this was the reason that these legal amendments took place. A positive change when it comes to the criminal legislation is the qualification of threat and attack against journalism because of their duty, and they are considered as special in this case, and they are protected by these provisions. And when it comes from the point of view of the judge, even these provisions have problems when it comes to their practical application, because the victim of a criminal offense still has to be registered and recognized. Secondly, the quality as a journalist should be recognized and obvious from the author of this criminal offense. Of course, the provision requires the purpose, and it should be clear that this attack was because of the duty as a journalist. Why I believe that there are problems in the application of this provision? Because in addition to the formal criteria I mentioned above, which have to do with the obligation of the journalist to register and to be recognized to benefit from this protection, there is an additional element which I believe is unnecessary and not only unnecessary, but it might be difficult for the practical application of the law, because the journalist can be attacked because of his qualities, even when he's not performing his duties, or when he or she lacks identifying elements as a journalist, and the author of the criminal offense might claim that he didn't recognize him. He was not widely recognized, and he was not aware of his duties. In these circumstances, on whether the journalist appeared to be as such and whether he was recognized as such or not by the author of this criminal offense, I believe these are elements, they are objective elements that come in view, and they also affect the circumstances of this criminal offense. This means that it was not necessary to be included in this provision. I believe they complicate things more than resolve them. What is important in this case has to do with the motive or the intent of the author of this criminal offense. This is going to be verified by the circumstances of the case. Placing this criteria that the journalist has to have recognized abilities is going to complicate the investigation of the criminal offenses. Legal amendments that I mentioned before, they had good intentions, I'm sure of that, but their practical effect remains to be seen. Although the recommendations of the European Union affect the journalism in order to decriminalize the criminal offenses of slander and defamation against journalists in the Albanian context, based on many reasons. For example, lack of regulation. Many problems that journalism is facing today, which is not the time or the place to mention them here. I believe that the Albanian lawmakers, decriminalization of defamation and slander is considered not to be a timely measure at this point in time. because there is a possibility that the victims will be left without protection from the abuses with the freedom of speech. Why? In many cases, the execution of civil court decision for compensation of the victims against the journalists, which are mainly online or not registered in Albania but registered abroad, who have abused the freedom of speech, results that the civil court decisions are not efficient and they cannot be executed. Many times, these media outlets are closed, they don't have a declared outcome and declared income, and court decisions remain simply on paper. So, considering the problems of the Albanian context, the Albanian state has aimed not only to act for the protection of journalists, but also to take proper measures against the unprofessional journalism that abuses with the principle of freedom of speech. What is noticeable in the, of course, I'm talking about the legal amendments, there is a tendency to control the journalist by the state through the process of their registration, because it leaves undefended the unregistered journalist, of course, if there is such a system to be considered in the future. Also, undefended are the journalists that act in the situation of anonymity, and this is another problem, the tendency of the state to control the media through their licensing, registration, etc., and the possibility of the state to affect the journalism through formalities. Another important aspect when it comes to the safety of journalists is the protection of sources. Thank you.
Nodding with the head and a bit kind of giggling a bit when you presented the law, because it is interesting to see this. You know, from my perspective, when somebody's going to say to a journalist, registration, recognition, you need to be recognized if you want to, use the benefits from the law and such. I can see the horns rising in the heads, but let's see, I assume some questions would appear on this topic because it is very much interesting. And yes, defamation and slander has been a topic in the Western Balkans for like 20 years. The practices we have is quite different. If we compare it in, let's say in Western Europe, you have many countries which are having criminal charges about defamation and an insult, unfortunately, and that saddened me. In this region, most of the countries has decriminalized, partially or fully. Let's say North Macedonia has been fully since 2013. But from the other hand, you have other countries in the Western Balkans which has been decriminalizing, and then they're criminalizing it again. So the practice is quite different, but it is a fact that it's one of the most vicious laws when it comes to pressing journalists with legal instruments, and I assume most of the audience would agree. I don't want to waste the time of my next colleague, which is actually the journalist on the stage. So, Radomir Kračković, you have been the president of the trade union of Montenegro, in which it scopes the media workers of this country, but also you have been active within the Safe Journalist Network, which is a regional platform in which very often I assume you speak about this kind of problem. So, my direct question to you is like, what is the trends? Like, how do you deal with impunity, and what is the most often types of attacks when it comes to media workers in Montenegro, but maybe potentially for the region as well?
Thank you, Dragan. It's a great pleasure to speak at this panel. Unfortunately, during last year we had a record number of attacks on journalists in Montenegro. It was 33, despite political will in Montenegro during recent years in order to prevent all of those attacks and have a quick response when attacks occurred. The problem in Montenegro is that we still didn't solve the most serious cases of attacks from the past, including assassination of journalist Duško Jovanović, 2004. Where still neither the killer nor the mastermind of this attack haven't been discovered. Then we have attempting murder of investigative journalist Olivera Lakić, 2018, and the trial is still ongoing, so 8 years after the attack. But also we had the most serious attack during last year. Was in near the Montenegrin town of Berane, where sympathizers of Chetnik movement attacked two photojournalists of two daily news papers during the removal of a monument of this Chetnik Duke and Second World War criminal Pavle Đurišić. So these photojournalists their cameras were taken away, they were attacked by dozens of people and preventing from reporting in public interest, and despite all of that only 2 people were convicted for this attack. When we talk about types of attacks during last year, we have more and more attacks from this online sphere, so from this kind of digital attacks, so threats, insults through social networks or via emails, and we have, as I've already said, the political will to deal with these cases, but in some of these cases we still did not have the results because the perpetrators or attackers of these online attacks did that from other countries in the region or even from other continents, so it's really difficult sometimes for police and state prosecutory office to discover who is behind it. But when we talk about these attacks that still did not have a proper, appropriate epilogue in our country, I could say that in all of these attacks we did not have a proper reaction of law enforcement or state prosecutory at the start. So we have in some of these cases bad investigation, then long trials, and at the end we have a lack of harsher sentences for the perpetrators. Also, some of these cases of attacks will have some kind of political context because some politicians were accused that they were inspirers or instigators of these attacks, and these are all by my point of view, reasons why we don't have results in this kind, in this most serious attacks on journalists. We have also some physical incidents or physical attacks on journalists during recent years in Montenegro as well as in the region. We saw yesterday that the situation is even worse than in Montenegro, more worse in Serbia or in some other countries. And so during last years we have more online attacks than physical attacks. We have a lot of physical attacks during 2020, 2021 and 2022 in Montenegro because of political instability during these years. So journalists were attacked during protests or some public events. And what is worrisome in Montenegro also during last years that we have the situation that politicians or officials are very often people who verbally attack journalists, even at the press conferences, or launch some smear campaigns against journalists or whole newsrooms. And then we have a situation also that their sympathizers verbally or physically attack journalists on some public event. On the other hand, I've already said that we have a political will in Montenegro because because big number of attacks on journalists to fight against that. But in practice, we have a rise of number of attacks. Why? Like in other, I think, Western Balkans or European countries, we have a rise of this right-wing discourse and hate speech. Also, we have some political anger or instability and deep misunderstanding of journalistic job. I think that this could be the reasons why we have this rise of number of attacks on journalists in Montenegro, but I think also in some other countries. I can now also talk about the possible solutions, or we will in the second.
In the second, I just wanted to very briefly. You said that the case of because this is the worst case in the Western Balkans in the last decade. I would say in 2018, Ms. Olivera Lakić was shot in her leg from a firearm close to her building, and the case is ongoing for the last 8 years. So my question is, do you in Montenegro have positive examples in which perpetrators were penalized with criminal charges for attacking the journalists at all?
Yeah, we had some positive impacts because like North Macedonia, Parliament of Montenegro also amended the Criminal Code 2021, and now we have some practice in our courts. So in some of these cases last year, we have harsher sentences for perpetrators introduced by the court. On the other hand, in some other cases, we didn't see so stricter penalties for attackers, or even in some cases, courts or prosecutors reclassified these criminal offenses to misdemeanors, and then we didn't have strict penalties, or even some attackers were released because of this reclassification of the criminal offense.
Thank you. Ms. Mijanović, welcome again. Coming as a contact point for safety of journalists from Republika Srpska, the question that I guess people would be interested is, how do you treat this kind of cases in which journalists are being attacked and harmed? What are the steps that you are taking it? And do you maybe have any practice in gender-based violence as well when it comes to journalists? And would you agree with me that maybe the digital attacks on journalists requests international assistance as well, because it's not only a national problem, it's also, I would say, a global one?
Dobar dan, još jednom.
Good day once again to all of you. First of all, I would like to say that the steps undertaken in Republic of Srpska, but in Bosnia and Herzegovina in general, are quite similar to all the other countries present at this conference, but mainly when we have a certain complaint due to a threat or violence against journalists. When we are talking about the complaints themselves in front of police officers, and depending on the event that took place, we inform the investigative judge to determine whether it is a misdemeanor, or we inform the public prosecutor if there are elements of a criminal act, and then further proceedings are taken. What is the most important thing for us as the Ministry of Interior of the Republic of Srpska is for the journalist or the association of journalists to file such a complaint. We cannot act just by knowing it ex officio. Somebody needs to file that complaint. Bearing in mind that we keep records of the different threats which have been reported since 2017, our analysis shows that the threats against journalists were mostly reported by the Association of Journalists of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we did act upon those. But in the last 3 years, we have a rise in the number of personal complaints by journalists. If you look at the analysis of the threats and the situation we have in the field, we can say that last year, out of all of the complaints, one was a complaint for a physical attack on a journalist. It was in a smaller environment, smaller city, and the journalist was attacked while doing his work, and his camera was damaged. He then approached then we sent to the appropriate prosecution office a report about 2 criminal acts, which is bodily harm and also damaging of official equipment. In 2024, we had a physical attack between a representative of one media house and another media portal, and this year we've had 3 verbal attacks on journalists which have been filed as misdemeanors, and in 2 cases it was female journalists, and in 1 case it was a male journalist. What I would like to say here is that of all of these complaints, more than 70% are related to digital online violence. That is the threats that they receive, mostly through social networks. A small percentage are threats which are done in real life or by phone. Very frequently, during the meetings, and the OSCE actually initiated those meetings last year in order to encourage journalists to report such threats to the contact points, such as we have them in the police in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the prosecution office, because journalists quite frequently say, why should we actually even report online threats? But my personal and professional opinion is that such threats need to be reported. Yeah, those investigations take longer, they're more complex, before we are fundamentally waiting to see whether the threat is a criminal act. If it has elements of a criminal act, we wait a long time to receive court orders for forensic examinations, and then if we determine that the addresses are abroad, you also need to look for mutual legal aid, and these processes take 2 to 3 years sometimes, but sometimes we actually even have resolutions, and these resolutions of such cases are the best message to people who send or write such threats, that they will not remain unpunished. I will give you an example that we had about 2 months ago. One reporter from Bosnia and Herzegovina, in 2023, he actually reported a threat, serious threats which were sent to him by a person under some kind of a nickname, life threats. So the case was under processing, and since then the person was not available for the law enforcement of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we did send out arrest warrant against him. He actually came about 3 months ago in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was arrested at the border. He spent about 24 hours in a police station to be processed, and now the prosecution office has raised an indictment about a criminal act. From the information I received from my colleagues is that he, of course, defended himself, that he just wrote it like that he didn't mean it. But I believe that the message we are sending, the experience that he had, is the best possible message, simply for people not to do it again. And when we do this, we always inform the public. We want to send a public message through the media that such things are not good or not normal and that they will be punished. So many cases do remain unresolved, but we have some resolved ones, and I believe that in this field we need to intensify the cooperation with the judiciary, because somehow these cases, at least as a contact point person, I can see that the cases themselves vary from prosecutor to prosecutor, and depends on individual and the prosecutor to judge whether there are elements of a criminal act, if the person was endangered or not. And I believe that a lot more effort needs to be invested both in the police, in the judiciary, prosecution, and with the journalists themselves.
I was actually having the idea to spend a few minutes per each of you in terms of speaking about potential things that can improve the situation. And before doing so, I just wanted to acknowledge one thing. I mean, 2026, 25, 24 has been like really difficult time for journalists on a global sense. Our partners, the global networks which are measuring the rights of journalists and killings to journalists, the numbers are very dramatic. And we have the most deaths of journalists in the last 3 years, happening more than in the last 15 years or 20, I would say. And that's mainly because we have active war aggressions happening globally on several spots as we speak. And, you know, the nature of the work of journalism is when you have such aggression and such a war, some of them, they should be there on the field in order to report. And by doing that, they're endangering their life to be threatened. So, apart of this, and my respect to people which are, you know, working as war journalists, in our context, we don't have war here in this region. It's all good, let's say. I mean, it's not all good, to be frank, but it's good, right? So, still, in the context of European continent, in the last 10 years, I'm going to try to jiggle with numbers now because I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be correct. So we didn't have a single murder of journalists in the region of Western Balkans, not officially. Yes, Montenegro case is from 2018. Ms. Lakic was shot, but she survived. And that happened 8 years ago. Yes, we do have unsolved murders which are older than that. And if we measure the trends, let's say in the last 10 years, I would say that unfortunately, very much unfortunately, we did have confirmed murders of journalists happening in Malta, happening in Greece, happening in Holland, happening in Slovakia. And I mean, that's a very huge misfortune. And why I'm saying this, what's the point? The point is, it can happen bad things to journalists in every country, unfortunately, because you have organized crime units, you have crazy individuals, you have bolstered atmosphere by politicians which are creating narratives in which they're putting journalists in a serious threat on purpose. But the question is how the institutions and how the states would react after that. So it's not, we should not feel comfort because nobody killed a journalist here in the last 10 years. So, oh, we're okay. No, that's one indicator. But the other indicator is actually what is the level of impunity. And that is why the panel's title today, it has the word impunity inside. And that is why we're having the criminal law. So should we change the laws? Should we train the judges, the prosecutors, the police, the journalists? Should we dedicate time in campaigns? Should we spend money in campaigning to, you know, simply to say to people like, hey, like if you hit a journalist on the street, it's a criminal verdict. I mean, it's a criminal deed. You would go in prison, right? So my point of saying this is that, yes, bad things can happen to any individual despite of the profession. The question is if the profession is doing a public good, and if the profession is working in the public interest, and that is all of you sitting here, because it's not only the journalists working for the sake of public interest, it's also judges, it's also police officers, it's also prosecutors which work for the public interest per se. So the question is, what can we do to make things better? Because if we see the statistics in the Western Balkans, I'm not going to go per country, not to be misunderstood. But let's say, for example, from 100 cases that happened in the last, I don't know, 3 years, pretty sure majority of them would be still pending, would be still ongoing. So that means like the level in percentages, we can prove that by facts. It's a bit dramatic. It means that either the laws are not good, or either the institutions are not performing well, or either both things. So I'm not putting a finger to blame anybody, don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to be constructive. So what should we do in order to decrease the impunity and to create a safer environment for journalists? I'm really much interested from the Albanian point of view. Let's say, Judge, you already started to give some hints previously about what is the gaps in your legislation and what can be actually corrected. So can you please give us some context a bit more in just like a few minutes?
I think there is room for adjustment in 3 aspects. So there is room for adjustment in 3 aspects. First, our legislation must go towards decriminalization of insult and slander for journalists, leaving only civil compensation. But this cannot be reached without having a healthy balance, because, on the other hand, we must improve the coordination of law enforcement bodies, not only in the country, but also in relations with foreign countries. The warning systems must be operational, and reaction and timely response systems towards the media actors, towards persons who threaten the journalists, and also the media professionals who abuse the right of speech. Also, the journalists must also enhance ethics in the media. Equally important in the Albanian context is addressing the media ownership and reducing the impact of this on the journalists. So unless this balance, this indispensable balance, is struck by finding other functional mechanisms, which for the moment are not in place, there are no chances that these criminal offenses are decriminalized. Currently, Albania has a journalism code, but its implementation remains voluntary. It's not obligatory. While the journalists themselves must find ways to cultivate journalistic ethics, but also the accountability culture, and also the readiness of the media to correct their own mistakes. Ultimately, we must understand one thing. Media is power, and the exercise of this power requires responsibility. Now, what can the state do to guarantee safety of journalists? First, set up designated investigation units. So, to create dedicated investigative units and sections in the prosecution offices which handle criminal offenses against journalists. This is possible. You could specialize some prosecutors and some judicial police officers in this area, particularly those related to online platforms, these kinds of criminal offenses. Maybe this requires legal amendments on how the criminal offense is documented and how the evidence is collected. I mean, the online crimes. So that these pieces of evidence are found admissible at court and ensure the conviction of the perpetrator. Institutions like the police, but also the associations of journalists, must coordinate together so that cases of threats to journalists or other crimes are documented properly and prosecuted properly and timely. Another important mechanism is establishing ways to prevent SLAPP lawsuits. Although they are civil lawsuits, finding mechanisms of protection against the SLAPP lawsuits is very important to the journalists, because these kind of lawsuits represent abuse with judicial civil practices and threaten the journalist by causing costs, stress, time wasting, and delay of proceedings. And the purpose, the aim, is not to win the case, but it is to lead the journalist to fatigue and eventually self-censorship. So that's what I thought are the most relevant points. Thanks.
Frank with you, like if I was about to write recommendations, I would 85% do the same recommendations you had. So it's pretty much in line with the standards of the recommendations of Council of Europe as well. So it's nice to hear a judge that has a realistic recommendation for improving situation when it comes to impunity and safety of journalists. But from the other hand, the unions and the associations, I mean, they have different role in this. So how can we, you know, as a community, can foster the role of the unions and the association of journalists to become even greater protectors when it comes to rights of journalists?
Well, hard question for us, but we will try.
I'm sorry.
Talking from Montenegrin perspective, I could say that in our country we have done three things during the last 5 years in order to fight impunity. First of all, as I have already said, the Parliament of Montenegro amended the Criminal Code 2021. That was the initiative of the media organizations, among them the union. This was our initiative and our way to help our colleagues which were victims of attacks to fight impunity. On the other hand, and secondly, Supreme State Prosecutor 2 years ago issued an instruction to all state prosecutors to intensify work on the cases of attacks on journalists. So they have clear instruction now to intensify work and to provide a legal epilogue of these cases. And during last year and this year, on the initiative of some journalists, with big support of OSCE mission to Montenegro and with logistical support of Trade Union of Media of Montenegro, our country formed official working group or mechanism for protection of journalists. This is very important in our context because we formed, the government of Montenegro formed one body which consists of 4 members of Trade Union of Media of Montenegro and 1 member from law enforcement, state prosecutory and government. And the main tasks of this mechanism are a quick response on attacks of journalists with clear connection with contact points in the police and state prosecutory office. Then legal and psychological support to free legal and psychological support to attacked journalists, and also we established the free media helpline for journalists who can apply the attacks on this through this helpline, and also We expect that this mechanism will provide trainings for the journalists in newsrooms about risks of our job, but also the plan is that the police and judicial officers have annual trainings about freedom of media and protection of journalists. The last task of this body will be preparation of the reports about all cases of attacks on journalists and their legal status. So this working group formed 3 months ago and have already dealt with 10 cases of attacks on journalists, provide legal or psychological help to attack journalists, and we hope that it will be a good mechanism which can help journalists on try to prevent this big number of attacks that we have in Montenegro.
That's really a lot for a country, and now I can tell why your Euro integration is going faster. Yeah. I guess it's one of the reasons or so. But yeah, I mean, thank you. It's a good positive examples, and you've also mentioned the contact points, and we already have one sitting to your left. Yeah. And Ms. Mijanovic, I mean, you have experience from Republika Srpska per se, but what makes a good contact point to be a good contact point? I mean, is it like building trust with journalists? Is it the frequent communication with prosecutors? Is it the trainings that people like you can be attending and make networking? Can you tell us how this, what is your experience regarding this?
I would say that this is a great solution. What our colleague said may be a great solution for the whole region, and this is something that is within the mandate of the Interior Ministry. We recognized some problems in the period between 2020 and 2022, and that is the sensibilization of the police officers. Every year we have new generations of police officers, and that is why it is important to have workshops with the new police officers, how to get to know the journalists, what their responsibilities with the journalists are. In other words, to educate them in order to avoid any unpleasant situations. As a focal point in the ministry, I would say that I feel I'm a very important partner to the journalists. There is a hotline for the journalists to dial every time they feel they are endangered, even to report if they think that the attacks or the threats are pretty serious. And we always act upon those reports. And what is my personal impression is that I used to be a journalist many years ago, and it is very important to feel that solidarity with the journalists. I have to say, when a journalist reports a crime, an attack, an assault, they give up on those reports in 30%. So this is not just a task of the police or the prosecutor's office, it is also a responsibility of the journalist to stay by the report. Radomir said that journalists should also be educated about why reporting is important, because if you withdraw the report, you cannot expect it to have a result or an epilogue. We said that in the Republic of Srpska a few years ago, there was an initiative to treat an attack on journalists or a threat against a journalist to be treated as a crime, just like it is if you threat or assault a police officer. There is no difference, really. There should be an equal investigation. The speed of the investigation should be the same. You know, we had an investigation and a trial that took 2 years about a crime, about an attack against a police officer. So why should these investigations and trials be quicker than the trials when we have a journalist attacked? So I don't think that this will guarantee that the case will be finalized with a verdict, but let's try.
Final conclusion, but before going that, we have like maybe 10 minutes from questions from audience, and I would be really happy, again you, I'm kidding, Isa, yes, so please present yourself, and it's pleasure to see you again.
Thank you. Sami Zuraj, kryetari I Asociacionit të Gazetarëve.
Sami Zuraj is head of Association of Journalists. To Ms. Kodraliu, some factual evidence of changes in the criminal code. There are 120 defamation cases. Last month, I had the 36th session in one of the courts of Elbasani in Albania, when I was charged with slander from a former prosecutor, high-level prosecutor. The victim, the plaintiff, well, for criminal offenses, the plaintiff asked the court that the amendments in January of 2026 to be interpreted and the process to proceed based on these amendments. The court refused to apply these new provisions because the burden of proof in this case rested with me. In fact, we all know that the burden of proof rests with the plaintiff. So she filed charges of slander, and she should bring sufficient evidence to prove that I was guilty of slander and defamation. By the court says, based on these changes, the burden of proof rests with the respondent. In this context, or the defendant, she said, we cannot proceed with the new criminal code, but the process should proceed with the old, and in the end, we'll make a decision. We, as an association, we believe that these amendments should be sent to the Constitutional Court for an exhaustive interpretation of these provisions. We have been in principle against such amendments, and we have asked the opinion of international organizations. We have discussed with many judges and prosecutors in Albania. And I can convincingly say none of the judges we have spoken, or serious judge, is not possible to make an interpretation what the parliament meant with the new amendments in the context. These amendments were made in the context of EU integration, when we are approving law after law. Most of these laws are not even understood by the members of the parliament. They are just being done for the sake of integration. And we have spoken with the EU delegation, with the European Commission, and we said, yes, absolutely, as a citizen of Albania, I am in favor of integration. I do want Albania to be integrated into the EU, but this cannot be done by approving tens of laws a week, and most of them are not understood by the civil society or other actors, and we have not had the possibility to provide our input. That's why I want to congratulate Ms. Kodraliu for the exhaustive explanation she offered, and these new changes that for me are very worrisome.
So we have a question from the gentleman on the left, please.
Thank you. My name is Aleksandar Jokic. I'm a criminal defense and media lawyer from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is not a question, it is a comment regarding those attacks on journalists in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We heard, for the beginning, I want to say that from Ms. Mirna, as I'm informed from my colleagues, journalists, she's doing a great job, and which I can't say about prosecutors' contact points, but that's for the journalists to say. Regarding this, that we had 3 verbal attacks on journalists here on this conference, but on other panel, we have a female journalist that was attacked a few days ago, and this is classified as verbal attack. She was doing her job on the field. A man came to her, took her phone, pushed her, said that he will break her, that he will not kill her, but implicitly that he will harm her. Very well, tried to break her phone. So if this is classified as a verbal attack, this was a misdemeanor offense. And this is classified as verbal attack. What is the next? When he punched her, that's only one punch. Break her one bone, only one bone. Where is the red line? So I just want to say we cannot so easy go over this and say, okay, it's just verbal. It's not verbal. He took her phone, he pushed her, he threatened, he comes to her face, pushed her, and threatened to break her, to harm her. So I just want to say we shouldn't go so easy on this violence against the journalists, because next step, I'm afraid, what's going to be. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I don't think that a single person in this room would object your opinion. We're in the same line, of course. And I also tried to give a comment in the beginning that the penological part, when it comes to punishment, is very much important, because that sends a message to others in future, meaning that some individuals, they can calculate, they can say, oh well, if I slap a journalist, it's going to be a misdemeanor, and then it means it pays off, right? You would silence him or her. So the penological part and the true punishment to be measured, not to be over-exaggerated, but not to be undervalued, is very much important in the context as well. And that means, and here this is part for the judges, to be frank, because you cannot, address this issue, let's say, the qualification sometimes can be done by the police, of course, but mainly when it comes to criminal charges, it's at the criminal court to scale the punishment, and I assume you would agree with me on this one. So. Of course.
What I wanted to say, in fact, is that crimes against journalists in Albania have always been considered, I'd say in general, I cannot be an absolute here, in general have been considered carefully with a particular sense as those against other individuals, common citizens. The latest amendments that consider journalists as a special subject are positive ones, but judges always had a special focus on the journalist. Even when they were not qualified by a special status, the judges have been very minded when it comes to journalists and the threats against them.
Unfortunately, I would say that the European Court of Human Rights, the practice that now they are gathering is becoming richer and richer. And since Council of Europe has 46 member states, all the countries presented in the room are being obliged to implement this law, in which journalists are not white bears. This is just a stereotype that somebody is trying to, play with our minds. It's basically, yes, the journalists should have greater legal protection because they work for the sake of the public interest. That makes sense, right? But my point is that the European Court is something that can be very much often useful tool, also for lawyers, also for judges and for prosecutors, because it's becoming with a rich, unfortunately, let's say, history now with cases different. We may have time for one question if somebody wants to raise their hand. If not, oh, damn, we have few. Sorry for saying that. Yes. So, because it's like, let's make an agreement. We have 8 more minutes, and then we're going to close the session because we are having the official closing of the session. So, I have 3 questions, so no more, and please make it like very short, and the response will be short as well. So, we're going to start with the colleague here, and then we're going to go on the right.
Thank you. I'll do my best to be as short as possible. Thank you all for great inputs and great presentations. I just have a question for Judge Kodraliu. I hope I pronounce it well, because in Bosnia and Herzegovina we are dealing with the same very vivid discussions between civil society representatives, media, journalists, and representatives of government. Who is a journalist? Should journalists be legalized their status? How to formalize their position? And I think also representatives of ministries of interior and also prosecutors' offices are dealing with those formal obligations, how to have an evidence who is really acting as a journalist or not, who is influencer, who really should be treated differently in accordance with their position in the democratic society and protection of public interest. So what could be the best practice to share when I come back to my country, how to position and what kind of experience to try to replicate in my country when it comes to the position. How do you think we should protect journalists and say we should do this or that to prove who is really a journalist? I hope I was clear.
Sure, I mentioned actually the formalization, the provision for formalization of a journalist is a way to control the journalist, as I said that. There is a reason. Because as there are journalists and media that serve the public interest, there are journalists who also have other interests and abuse with the freedom of speech. Due to the lack of other tools, other mechanisms to make this division, the state has tried to balance this by formalizing the journalism, and that's not the best way, but it's the best solution for now. But the state has a duty to decriminalize in the future slander and defamation. There are other alternative tools to be found to fight the cases of abuse with the freedom of speech, because that's what we're trying to balance, this public interest and defamation.
We had Yelena first, and then the lady behind, and Mr. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Hi, this was very interesting what you have spoke about. However, I just feel compelled to say a few things about Serbia, because I kind of felt that we are talking about nuances, the approaches, the legal framework, the practice by judges and prosecutors, whereas in Serbia we had last year more than 383 cases, as Nils noted, of attacks, intimidation, and threats against journalists, and only 3 court ruling. And in one case, the guy who was sentenced, he escaped, he left the country. So it tells you about the state of rule of law, but also tells you about the context in which we're living. So for us, it will be maybe proper to talk about how to survive impunity in Serbia. Also, we had a Supreme Court ruling on the case of the Slavko Čirovija appellate court decision in the Slavko Čirovija case, where they found people who were on trial are not guilty, and Supreme Court said that the verdict was in not accordance to the standard. The interpretation of the law was not proper. The statements, important statements, were not taken into account. So how do we deal with that?
Thank you.
Can I respond? I mean, look, I don't think that there is kind of a special formula for one country. But since the Serbian context, which is happening now, and now I'm speaking not as a moderator, I'm speaking as director of Safe Journalist Net, which is a regional network. So we're measuring the trends, and we're trying to be proactive about it. And the problem is that the situation in Serbia is having a spillover effect. So it's affecting all the countries in the region. And when somebody would say, where are you from? Skopje. Ah, it's okay, you're not from Serbia now, from, you know, in journalistic community, now it's horrible. I'm saying, no, it's not the problem from where to be or not to be, because somebody would say we are okay, but we are not because our neighbors are being horrible about it. So the thing is, the political situation now, I'm afraid, and I guess that you would be on the same page, is not allowing to make any systematic changes. Because in Serbia, I would say you have almost all the elements. You have the contact points. You have the ongoing working group for 2.5 years. You have the legal amendments of the criminal code. You have the first. It was like 10 years ago, was it? We have it since 2023. And you have skillful individuals, very strong associations, some individual lawyers and prosecutors and judges that I personally met, they're like excellent about it. So, but something is missing, you know. So you have everything, but you are losing it. It's bizarre from one point, and I think that that basically I don't want to be misunderstood, but that the political establishment that you're having it now is not allowing to have any structural changes about it. And if I were you, because we had that similar situation in 2012 and 2013, 14, because Macedonia was in very deep political crisis at that time, we started to actually raise the problem on international level higher. So I guess that alarming all the cases, registering them, trying to resolve and making the statistics in order to make an argument is something that it remains to be done, because that's something that should not be forgotten. And I'm so sorry that half of the cases that happened in the Western Balkans, because we have around 10,000 in the last 10 years, and around, not 10,000, sorry, around, yeah, actually around 1,000, but half of those happened in Serbia and in North Kosovo in the last 2 years. So basically the region is not really going in better pages. So yeah, shortly, to register, to try to help the people with legal assistance and to psychological assistance if possible, and to try to be, you know, resistant and resilient about it. And I'm sure that with solidarity and with the region helping, we can improve the situation, because we need to remain optimists about it. I can't really say more, sorry. And since we are after 12, guys, I'm gonna count the seconds. So we have the gentleman in front of me on 12 o'clock and the lady. Very short, please.
What you can do, the journalist organizations should be more united, and they should increase their voices in order to raise awareness among the citizens, first and foremost, to impose respect for their work, and in this case, although the politicians, but it is necessary for you to be united, a united front.
Very briefly, I would just like to share, I'm Armin from OSCE Mission in Kosovo. I would like just to share briefly the Kosovo experience, which may be also a good lesson, because I think that all in all, it's a positive experience. So before 2007, there were a couple of cases when journalists were imprisoned for defamation. After 2007, defamation was decriminalized. So Kosovo has a law against civil law against defamation and insult. 10 years later, and here thanks also to Ambassador Bratu and our support to the Association of Journalists of Kosovo, there is a central level prosecutor coordinator and local level 7 prosecutor coordinators which deal with cases of crimes and attacks against journalists. And in January 2026, the Kosovo Judicial Council has adopted a 3-year strategy which foresees prioritization of cases of attacks against journalists. So all in all, this is a positive progress where also we play a role as a mission, However, this is something that could be noted and as a lesson learned. And after all, I think that freedom of association is constitutional guarantee also in Albania. And in that respect, I would call for basically letting journalists be free. Don't ask for registration. This is something that in Kosovo would be considered unacceptable, totally unacceptable. So journalists should be free to operate, shouldn't be subject to some sort of registration, because I couldn't learn whether...
Sorry, yes, we got the point, and I'm not trying to motivate a debate about it. I mean, common sense says that we should not register journalists per se at all, and the judge also just claimed that she criticized the law as such, that this can be misused by the authorities, of course. So it's a huge space for improvement here. We have like 27 seconds for the lady in the back, and if you're longer, I think that they're going to cut off the electricity, so please.
I have something very briefly to add to the discussion we had so far. The General Prosecutor approved at the end of 2024 a memo for the security of journalists, which was distributed to prosecutors, and they contributed in this process for journalists to see their cases with priority and the investigation to take case on an expedited basis, and that produced effects last year. And we have seen many cases that were resolved very quickly, and they were sent to court very quickly. And I agree with the journalist for the cases with the involving journalists should be indicted, and they should follow up, especially when it comes to their security.
Great. You know, I'm not going to try to summarize everything because it's pretty much obvious. I'm just going to say one more thing. You know, I've been doing this thing for some years. Actually, today, exactly, I'm like 42 now, as of today. So I've been doing this for like 15 years, more or less. And one thing I can compare. So 10 plus years ago, it was almost impossible to have in the same room journalists, judges, prosecutors, lawyers, and members from the police. Today we are like criticizing together certain solutions. So I can see a positive evolvement in the multi-sectorial collaboration. And when we're going to speak about impunity and safety next time, I'm sure that we would agree again that the key is actually to collaborate multi-sectorial, because this is not something that we should just say it's the work of the police or it's the work of the judges or the journalists themselves. It's something that we should do it together. So by that, yeah, we should remain in solidarity. And I'm going to thank you for the speakers for having the good points that you already expressed. Thank you very much. And of course, great questions and great comments and great hearing about it. So let's give yourself applause, and maybe we're going to steal a bit from it. So thank you. And now I invite you to the next panel, and we're wrapping up the conference.
Test. Hey.
Ladies and gentlemen, it seems the time has come to say a few closing remarks, and I think this day and a half has gone very quickly, and somehow I feel that we're just at the beginning and not at the end. But let me say that I think we're at the continuation of a process that must continue. And we will, of course, have a Southeast Europe Media Conference again next year. Where, we will have to determine, but we will get back to that. Anyway, dear friends, dear colleagues, we're now at the close of the 11th Southeast Europe Media Conference, and I want to express my great gratitude to all of you for your engagement, your openness, your thoughtful contributions over these past 2 days, day and a half. I want once again to thank our colleagues at the OSCE presence here in Tirana for their great support, contributions, and of course to my colleagues from the office, but also to all the colleagues from all the field operations throughout the region, without whose great support and dedication we would not be able to have this event. So thank you all. I think the conference has once again demonstrated the value of bringing together journalists, authorities, civil society representatives, academics, and other partners from across Southeast Europe and beyond. This is a time of very rapid change and growing uncertainty. Spaces for meaningful dialogue and regional cooperation, I believe, are more important than ever before. Over the course of the day and a half of discussions, we have examined a wide range of issues that are shaping the future of journalism and affecting media freedom in this region. And you and we have reflected on the pressures that are facing journalists today, from safety threats, digital surveillance, to political polarization, economic instability, and not the least the disruptive impact of big tech and emerging technologies. At the same time, conversations have also highlighted the resilience, the professionalism and determination that continue to define journalism across Southeast Europe. And I think that point was very well brought home in the opening keynote speech by Tamara Filipovic on the situation of journalists in Serbia, but that journalists continue to work despite all the pressures. One of the speakers in the last panel on impunity spoke about the need for solidarity among journalists. This was said by a judge. I think it's extremely important. Journalists have to stand together. Attack on one journalist is an attack on all journalists. And then there's something else that also needs to be said. Journalists are divided in different organizations. In some participating states, there are multiple journalist associations. That's not only in this region, but also in Switzerland, for example, there are multiple. But the solidarity is important. And there's another thing that I think we have to keep in mind. Gongos. Gongo associations are being formed by governments that really don't want independent media. And we will see more of these organizations in the time to come. Mark my words. I hope I'm wrong, but mark my words, I think this is what we're going to see in many countries in the time ahead. So we have to approach these issues with caution, in solidarity, but in respect of principles. The principles are what we need to stand up for and defend. Because if we lose the principles, and this was the message I tried to convey in my opening remarks, we lose everything, folks. And the principles are not something that we can play with. We should not play with principles. Because once we start playing with principles a la carte, today we like this principle, tomorrow we like something else, we're lost. We are doomed. And I see my job as defending these principles in the best way that I can. That doesn't always mean a full frontal assault, but it means how to maneuver in a difficult context. And it's not only in Southeast Europe or Central Asia where politicians are asking some very fundamental questions about what is the role of journalism, who is a journalist. In the last panel, there was the beginning of a discussion about registration of journalists. I heard what was said, but I'm also hearing what foreign ministers are saying to me in Western participating states. This is a discussion, ladies and gentlemen, that is coming, and we have to be prepared for it. The discussions over this day and a half, I think, have raised more questions than solutions, but solutions have also been part of the discussions. Strengthening journalism as a public good, I think, is a theme that could not be more timely. And all over the OSCE, among the 57 participating states, even in the Western states, or west of Vienna, as we say, we see pressures being put on public service media. Pressures being put in terms of financing, pressures being put in terms of trying to have control over the appointment of directors. It's not just in this region. We're seeing this expanding beyond. A few weeks back, I think it's now 2 months back, between 10 and 20,000 people were demonstrating in the streets of Riga, defending the public broadcaster. I issued a statement. My statement was followed by an even more critical statement by the European Parliament and later by the EBU, defending the independence of the public broadcaster in Lithuania. But Lithuanian government are not very happy with me for having made that statement. So it's not just east or south of Vienna that we have issues. The issues are coming across the board. Strengthening journalism as a public good is a topic which is not focusing on this region. It is a general topic, but this region as well is affected by it. And dare I say, BH RTV is a good case in point. Now, throughout the conference, we were reminded that journalism is not simply another sector or another industry. Its role reaches beyond the newsroom. Journalists help citizens make informed decisions. They enable accountability and transparency, creating spaces for democratic debate and helping societies resist manipulation and division. But journalism, to fulfill this role, needs to have adequate conditions that allow it to do this. We have heard repeatedly that strengthening journalism as a public good requires more than declarations. But declarations are important, but they are not everything. And as Foreign Minister Hoxha also mentioned, it's not enough to have the laws. We have to go beyond that. We have to have implementation. Strengthening journalism requires practical measures, requires legal protections for journalists and media workers, and it requires transparent and accountable institutions, sustainable funding models, professional standards, not the least, and safeguards against abuse, both online and offline. What are these safeguards? We have legislation. We have institutions. But ladies and gentlemen, the safeguards that are the most important, in my view, are the commitments that individuals make to the principles. The commitments to uphold the principles, to act in accordance with principles. And we see that also diminishing. We need only to look across the Atlantic to see how quickly checks and balances evaporate. Each and every one of us must be aware of this. Our discussions on the safety of journalists made clear that attacks, intimidation, and harassment continue to pose serious risks throughout this region. We also heard important perspectives on the growing challenges posed by online violence and digital surveillance, particularly for investigative journalists and female journalists. Another strong message emerging from this conference is that public trust in journalism cannot be taken for granted. Trust must be built, it must be maintained through ethical reporting, editorial independence, transparency, and accountability. It's vital that journalists and newsrooms operate in accordance with ethical codes of conduct, and that there are objective, competent, and capable self-regulatory systems in place to address the issues and mistakes that invariably will arise in any human endeavor, including journalism. Now, this is a protest, folks. I see them leaving. It's the mission to Serbia. Mark my... Okay, thank you, folks. Thank you. Bye. Okay, I don't know, maybe that's it. Yeah. I have a few more things I would like to mention. You have also explored the opportunities and risks linked to technological transformation. Artificial intelligence and digital platforms are reshaping the information space at a remarkable speed. And while these developments do offer new possibilities for journalism, they also raise critical questions about visibility, viability, safety, and the spread of disinformation. And in many ways, ladies and gentlemen, we have been here before. You haven't, but I have. My generation. And allow me to make a short digression on that point. The 1960s Canadian philosopher and media theorist Marshall McLuhan famously coined the phrase, "The medium is the message." That was in 1964. By this, McLuhan meant that every medium delivers information in a different way, and that content is fundamentally shaped by the medium of transmission. He wrote at a time when television was the new medium. And there were debates about the impact of television on news transmission and consumption, understanding. And although television news had the advantage of offering video and live coverage, making a story come alive more vividly, it was and remains a faster-paced medium than either radio or print. And that meant that more stories got covered, but in less depth. A story told on television was flashier, less in depth, and with less context than the same story covered in a monthly news magazine. So the argument was that people who got the majority of their news from television would likely have a particular, more superficial view of the world, shaped not by the content of what they watched, but by the medium through which the content was transmitted. A computer scientist at the time, Alan Kay, put it, and I quote, "Each medium has a special way of representing ideas that emphasize particular ways of thinking and de-emphasize others," unquote. And he was writing not in 1964, but in 1994, when the internet was just transitioning from an academic research network to an open public system. And here we are today. We're having the same discussion, but with a different medium. I only want to make the point that we have actually had this type of discussion in the past, and we must have it again. The concerns and the debate sound very familiar to what some of us experienced in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And by the way, as a fun fact, McLuhan was also the innovator of the concept of the global village. McLuhan described how the world was becoming more interconnected as a result of the propagation of media technologies. But this is a discussion for another time. So these are challenges that transcend individual countries, societies, and institutions, and they can only be dealt with through joint approaches. And here the fundamental principles remain at the core of how we can, how we indeed must, deal with these challenges. In my opening remarks, I spoke at some length about the principles on freedom of expression and the media, enunciated by James Madison and Thomas Jefferson in the Federalist Papers that informed the American Bill of Rights. These principles were recognized as important for a functional democratic system of government, or as Lincoln put it in another context, government of the people, by the people, for the people. These principles remain important to this day, although most people, if they think at all about the principles, likely think of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948 and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights adopted by the UN in 1966. Not the least its Article 19 on the freedom of opinion and expression. These are fundamental principles. They are not new innovations. Let us neither forget the provisions of the Helsinki Final Act, which is the foundational document of the OSCE from 1975, and its commitment to the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech and media. These principles, ladies and gentlemen, must be defended and adhered to today as in the past. And when I hear some politicians talk to me about how these principles are outdated, that worries me quite a lot. They are not outdated. They are relevant today. So, ladies and gentlemen, this conference, I believe, has underscored once again the importance of regional cooperation and multi-stakeholder engagement and dialogue. The exchange of experiences and practical approaches, I think, is valuable and is encouraging. And I think it's through this kind of cooperation that stronger responses can emerge. We should nor should we neglect the importance of colleagues from across the region meeting, discussing, comparing, and also supporting each other. There are myriad challenges to media freedom, safety of journalists, and public interest media throughout the OSCE region, and also here in Southeast Europe. Solidarity, as I said, among media professionals and the wider media community does build resilience in the face of the ongoing and even escalating challenges to the very principles and practice of media freedom. Importantly, our discussions were not limited to identifying problems. We also had some focus on solutions. We heard examples of innovative investigative journalism, initiatives supporting media information literacy, efforts to improve transparency in media ownership, and practical approaches to protecting journalists and strengthening professional resilience. We can learn from the experiences of colleagues, and best practices can help guide our own work wherever we come from. But a point was made in the keynote address of Tamara Filipovic, and the question that was asked in this last session: what do we do when all the mechanisms and legislation are in place, but nothing is being followed? And increasingly, I fear that that is where we are headed. In the days of the Warsaw Pact, when Hungary was seen to be the most liberal countries of the Warsaw Pact, the Hungarians had excellent legislation. And at one point, this was discussed, and I was told, yeah, but you see, this is for show and tell. This is for show and tell. We have these laws to show and talk about it, but we don't plan to implement it. Now, I'm an old guy. I'm a product of the Cold War, and I am concerned that a lot of the things that I experienced in the 70s and 80s, I'm now starting to hear again from countries that espouse democratic values, as they say. It just reconfirms to me the importance of standing up for principles. But what do we do when everything is in place, but nothing is being followed? And ladies and gentlemen, Serbia is a great case in point, because they were far ahead of the other countries of the region when it came to institutional structures for protection of journalists, even legislation. But it doesn't mean a thing unless it's being implemented. except to show and tell. And when we had the focal points meeting, we have a network of, I think, 34, 35 national focal points on safety of journalists. We met in Bern about a month ago. National focal points from various countries read out their speeches, telling us all about how they have the laws and the structures in place. And they do. But they're not being implemented. Implementation is, of course, the key. We have to think about this, we have to work on this. So, the job, the work does not end here. The conversations held during this conference must continue beyond Tirana. They should inform policies, strengthen institutions, and inspire continued collaboration across the region. I would have liked if we could have more politicians participating in these conferences. Politicians who are in committees, parliamentary committees for information, media, human rights. They actually need to be part of this conversation, and they need also to be held accountable for what is not happening. Even government officials, but government officials, of course, are very busy people. They can't sit for a day and a half in a conference, but maybe they have some advisors who could participate with us. This is something that I will think about how we can do for the next Southeast Europe Media Conference. And I have to engage more with politicians. It's not enough for me to engage with you in the media community, because the people who have the power, it's not us. It's those people who are in position. So we need to have a truly multi-stakeholder engagement. It's great that we have police, prosecutors, judges, and journalists sitting together. It's hugely important. We need others as well to be part of this. So the work doesn't end here. We must continue. I am personally strongly committed to working with you for the protection of the principles, to defend the principles. And I can commit to you that I and my office will do our very best to support the principles, to support independent, ethical journalism throughout the OSCE region. But for us to succeed, we need to stand together. And I need for you to be part of the solution and not just complaining about the problems, because there are lots of problems. And with those words, I will once again thank everyone who contributed to these days. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time. I hope you found it worthwhile. Safe trip back home. And what do they say? A bientôt. So, see you.